Yeah. So I guess let's just start with some introductions, I guess, as people trickle in. And I'm not sure if everyone might not be aware that you both are from Michigan. So Jason and Waldo, welcome to this screening. Why don't you just give the audience a quick introduction yourselves? How about you start, Jason?
Sure, yeah. Hey, everybody. I'm Jason. Yeah, I grew up in Bloomfield Hills, Michigan, which is where I am currently quarantined. I did not go to U of M though, although I come from a big U of M family. I ended up going to NYU, and I currently live in Los Angeles when I'm not in lockdown. And yeah, that's this script. We'll bake all that stuff into the questions, but that's my very very general intro.
There you go.
Your turn.
Yeah, it's my turn. I'm Waldo. I went to U of M. Actually, not from Michigan. I grew up on the East Coast. I'm from the Washington D.C. area, right outside Maryland, in Maryland. But I did go to U of M, and then I'm actually in downtown Los Angeles right now in my small studio apartment. And yeah, me and Jason met up out there, and we kind of connected over Michigan-ness and all that stuff too. So.
Oh,
Yeah.
cool. So we're gonna pretend, like I said, we're pretending this is a normal post-film Q&A. So in my head, we're standing in the Michigan Theater. The credits are rolling up on screen. Round of applause to you both. Thank you for being here. And so I like talking about. I want to ask you a question about the ending of the film first. Just the ending is so relieving and cathartic. And Griffin, the lead actor who plays Mo, he does so much by doing so little in that film by just letting the scene breathe. So Jason, I want to how do you direct somebody in a scene like that where they're just driving and to emote so much?
Yeah, well, there's like two things happening. One is, with a shot like that, there's a lot going on, right? We're on a process trailer and it's starting to rain, and we maybe have like 3 takes of it, and we got to get Pete in the background perfectly. And it's funny, Pete ended up sitting down. I think the last take that we shot was the one we used, and Pete sits down on the curb. Mm-hmm. And like a few seconds into the shot, and that was just something that he just decided to do, which he hadn't done on the first 2 takes, and so that was something that I always loved. And the other thing, and then just directing Griffin in that, is that for me that moment is like was the kind of the most important, obviously the most important part of the film, and kind of the final piece of Mo's journey. And it was about he had to feel kind of guilty, mm-hmm. Like the main thing was that he felt guilty that he was abandoning this guy, but he knew he had to. And so it wasn't like a happy moment, like that kind of cathartic, I know it's cathartic for the audience, but for him, I think that he feels sad. And I think that he's like going to carry this guy with him forever, even though they're probably not friends anymore. And so that was kind of the conversation that Griffin and I had. And also, I kind of set up this shot in the open because a lot of people said, "Oh, the ending made me feel sad," and and some people like you say, it was a cathartic moment. For me, I didn't do it. I didn't really try to hide the fact that this is where we were going. And then if you look at the opening credits of the movie, it's a scene in the parking lot where it's a bunch of people hanging out, and slowly people start to disappear, and you end up with just Zeke and Mo. So the whole point of them, for me, of the ending was that Mo was not leaving the parking lot, and leaving Zeke alone.
Yeah, I mean, to add on that, like, I think it's one of those things that this is one of those, that's a great image that kind of tied the whole movie together, of course, but also in the script, I could just seen that being put together. Like that's the image that really drew me to the script, and that's why connection between the director and his department heads are really important, because we have had some pushback already on other things to make it like a different, more uplifting movie when we knew that we all wanted something like this to tell us the story that we wanted to tell. So, I mean, it's more just a real, like, it felt like I grew up in, like, the people I grew up in the East Coast with. So it was like, no, it's not the way, we shouldn't end this on a happy note. It should end on a real note. So
yeah, Waldo can tell you that, like, we screened the movie. The first time we screened the movie, we gave little questionnaires out, you know, and the questionnaires were always, did you like the movie? Yes. How did the ending make you, like, did you like this character? Yes. How did you like this character? How did the ending make you feel? Sad. That was the overwhelmingly what everyone said. It was sad. And I was okay with that. That's kind of how I wanted you to kind of have fun and then kind of feel a little bit sad for Zeke. And I don't, you know, it's not one of those movies where the two main characters like drive off onto their next adventure together. And the producers were like, we got to change the ending. Everyone's sad. I said, that's okay. It's kind of like, that's kind of the tone of the story is bittersweet and you're laughing and they go, no, they're all saying the ending's sad. I'm like, we did our job. So then we had to push back on that, and there was a
well, we kind of pulled the Godfather, right? You know, the Godfather, and it's George Walter Murch and Coppola. They loved the theme of the Godfather, but the producers hated it, and so they're like, oh, we'll get to it. I told this to Jason. I was like, don't worry, we'll just tell them we'll get to it, and then we got into Sundance. I was like, we're not getting to it. Like,
yeah, getting into Sundance kind of created all the leverage we needed because it was one of these things where we finished shooting the movie in September, and I guess in the beginning of September, right? You probably remember the dates better than I do.
Yeah.
And we basically turned into Sundance my director's cut. It was like a quick. We powered through. So normally I would have my director's cut, and then the producers would come in and give all their notes, of which they had many. But luckily, the movie had gotten into Sundance before it was time for the producer's cut, and that gave us that kind of ability to say, well, this obviously is working, so let's not change it. Let's not add a scene in the credits where Zeke tries to start a podcast or something. Because that's not really the tone we're going for. Yeah.
I wanted to ask about Griffin. I don't know if you're aware of this, but our audience just saw Griffin not too long ago on screen at the Michigan Theater. He was in a film called Dinner in America.
Dinner in America, yeah.
Which
he actually shot after our movie.
Right, from another Michigan filmmaker. And his film is actually very, at least similar to yours in tone. Where did he come from?
I had seen Griffin. Well, I can't speak to where he came from, you know, until I came into my life. But I can tell you how I had seen Griffin in this Netflix show, American Vandal, which, you know, it's a high school show, but it's also it's a satire of true crime kind of things, but Griffin kind of was the sole authentic high school kid in this movie, like in a show that was all about like it was kind of silly about true crime mockumentary style things. Like he was the one person that made me feel like this was a real high school and this was like real, and these were real kids and with real emotions. And I always kind of like, that was kind of my favorite part of that show. And so I always liked him. And it's funny, originally when I written the script, I imagined Mo to be a late bloomer, a much smaller kind of, I think he was much more awkward. Griffin is like, if you meet him, he's like so confident and charming and handsome. And I imagine like it's probably something closer to what my own personal high school experience was. And there's like a few, like there's still some of that left in the script, but a lot of that, there was like a whole storyline where he was like, you know, where he was like growing slower, like he was like, you know, still one of the shortest ones in his class. And then we were auditioning kids and I loved Griffin. And I was worried that he was far and away the best actor of all the kids we auditioned, but I was worried that he was too confident. He was too tall and he was too like, and like he was kind of, but he played this innocent so well, that I ended up saying, you know what, it doesn't matter that these specific character traits that I thought were important, you know, this late blooming thing didn't really matter because he was the best actor, and he was, when you put him with Pete, their chemistry was like off the charts, that I didn't really have to do anything. That what was amazing was you put the two of them in a car together, and like that's the movie. And there was this moment where it was like, it was so important to me that we cast a teenager, like a true teenager. It's not like a 20-year-old playing 17 or 18, but like a true 17-year-old. And especially across next to Pete, because you just feel that danger. Like if you're a parent and you see Griffin and Pete together, you're like, get these kids away from, like, get this kid away from Pete Davidson. And so that was kind of like, by just having that on its face before they even opened their mouths, that did it so much of the work for me that, you know, and Griffin was that kid. Even though he's much cooler than he plays in the movie.
He's really seasoned too. He's just a really seasoned actor, and you can tell in the dailies every single time he catches himself. Jason did a great thing with his actors where he wouldn't do too many takes because he had a really good rapport with them. You should tell the camp stuff that you always tell, but he always end off with a fun take at the end. Like, just do whatever you want. Like, be fun with it. Put your spin on it. And I wouldn't say we used it all the time, but it definitely got in the cut a lot because we went for more natural takes. Like, Pete gave us levels that are like, hit this eye. Same thing with Griffin. Same thing with John Cryer and everybody else. But then they also gave us levels that low, and we usually went with the lower levels. So, and Griffin that's the great thing about a good actor. Is like you don't have to ask. He just gives it to you. So,
Jason, you touched on the similarities between Mo's personality and yours, which brings me to a question from Terry, asking about, is the story at all autobiographical?
The story, you know, I think that Mo's journey is autobiographical, like his arc is autobiographical in the sense that, like, I had two older brothers and they always had friends hanging around that I always thought were really cool. And so I think I had a lot of Zekes in my life, both in Michigan and then in New York. I think I was constantly gravitating towards people that I, you know, thought were exciting and fun. And I think that this relationship, for like a young boy, is like, it's always the person who like gives you your first joint or your first cigarette is like always some older kid. And then you never, like, I think that like so many guys like have this relationship, and, you know, when they're younger. And for me, I think that I was really close with those guys for a while and then outgrew them. The events of it was basically like I had that arc. He idolizes Zeke, they become really close friends, and then that patina kind of goes away and he becomes disillusioned and eventually outgrows him, but kind of always retains all the things that Zeke taught him. Like I imagine that like his taste in music and movies, and so he's learned, so like he's gonna, like, a lot of Zeke will always kind of be with him while he kind of moves on. And that's kind of definitely how I feel about a lot of those people in my life. But then it became, okay, what are the story beats to fill out this arc? So when he's idolizing him, like what, like, and those were all fabricated in terms of just like,
not
okay,
all.
Well, not all. What was that?
You said that there's like the jumping in the pool really happened, right? Like sort of.
Oh yeah, I had a friend who jumped in the pool. That was not me, but he was running from the police in Michigan and definitely jumped in the pool. But there was no like, I meant more like the drug dealing and those kind of things, and also like there was a moment when we cast Pete where it was like, okay, you're not gonna idolize Pete Davidson and not get a tattoo. Right? Like for me, I don't have any tattoos, but that was like what are the different ways in which Zeke can rub off on Pete, on Griffin in these different ways. And so the tattoo was something that we wrote once Pete became attached. And yeah, say that just that arc, that was the autobiographical thing.
Okay. So most of the tattoos on Pete Davidson were real, right? Including the Hillary Clinton one.
Yeah, I mean, not only were all of Pete's tattoos real in the movie, but the scene where Nick, played by Machine Gun Kelly, is giving him a tattoo, he gave him the tattoo for real on like during shooting, because which was really, I had like talked to some tattoo artist friends and was like, I don't want this to feel like when you like watch, you know, like Law and Order, and the guy's not wearing gloves, and he's like, hey, and it's like, it's so fake. I was like, these kids actually should know what they're doing, and I was so prepared to like direct the scene, and they were like, well, we'll just do it. We'll just give him a tattoo. They like didn't know why they had to fake it. I guess they're a little bit more like, and so then it became like giving Pete the scene, and it was like, I guess he just his name, right? What do you want tattooed on you? So he gave him Zeke, and that's where that little joke, how do you spell Zeke? But that was just, and I don't think that I realized we'd have constantly giving him the tattoo over and over again for the multiple takes. But hey, it worked.
You mentioned Machine Gun Kelly, which brings me to a question from Chris.
Yeah.
I think there's some tongue-in-cheek nature here, but it says, how seriously do we need to start taking the acting career of Machine Gun Kelly? Is he the real deal?
Here's what else. Look, I think that a lot of people's experiences going into my movie were they had definite opinions of a lot of these actors, whether it's Pete, who you know from SNL or stand-up, or it's someone who with a name like Machine Gun Kelly, who you probably, have, if you know or don't know his music. I actually didn't know his music, but I had seen him in a Cameron Crowe show called Roadies, a one-season show that Cameron Crowe did for Showtime, where he was fantastic. And then even with John Cryer, who at least for my generation and the people younger than me, I saw the movies that the John Hughes movies, but I think that the people coming to this movie especially only know him, like the high school kids and college kids finding this movie only know him from 2.5 Men. So to get to show him in a different light as this like very real dad, not the kind of goofy dad from his show, I think there was a lot of like playing with expectations, and like Machine Gun Kelly or Coulson. Like on the first day of set, I was like, do I call you Machine Gun Kelly or MGK? And he was like, you just call me Coulson. So, I think this is what I'll say. When everything is said and done about him, he will be known for his acting career. I think that he will be known as Coulson Baker much longer than he'll be known as Machine Gun Kelly. I think he's a really talented actor. And he's actually, the story of him coming into the movie was, when you're making an independent film, like you have no time to do chemistry reads and to cast these parts that and to do rehearsals. I knew I was gonna have no time to rehearse, and that character there's not a lot of him on the page, of that Nick character. And in my first meeting with Pete, I said, look, you got two kind of goons that are always hanging around, 2 or 3 goons in your apartment, and what friends of yours do you have great chemistry with? Because we'll cast them. They're small roles, and the movie will be better if we cast people that you are friends with and they're funny. Like, who are your comedian friends? Let's just cast those guys. And I said, like, who's the funniest comedian that you're close friends with? And he goes, oh, Machine Gun Kelly. And I was like, that's not what I meant. And he goes, no, dude's hilarious. So I was like, all right. I went back and I like looked at some of his stuff, and I watched the Cameron Crowe show, and I had like a Skype with him, and I was like, what is this gonna be? This Skype with this rapper, and he had read the script 2 times, and he was really thoughtful, and the original version of that character was like a much sketchier guy. He was much more of like a even worse version of Zeke, maybe closer to what that guy Ricky that shows up to hotbox the car, right? And Coulson was like, I don't want to play this kind of guy that that seems sketchy, and maybe he's a drug dealer and he's a bad guy. I'd like to be like, I think people have the wrong idea about him. And so this idea that he was worried about Mo and didn't realize he was 16 and was constantly like, I don't know, maybe you should go to the party with him, and every line and like doesn't like this girl's drinking the beers with him, like that all came out of my conversation with Coulson. So I would say, yeah, you may have to start taking him seriously. I did.
He was very conscious in this role. It was one of those things that he sat there, and I remember after we screened a couple scenes for Pete and Coulson and Jordan Rock, and he came up to me, Coulson did, and was just like, well, I don't know, my character seems like a little like not strong or whatever. And I was like, what are you talking about? Your character's super strong. Like, you're trying to be a protector, even though you're doing all this terrible stuff, and you can't afford a car, and you're almost 30, and all these other things. Like, yeah, it's he's definitely a thinker for sure.
Yeah, he was very anxious about this one scene in the bar where he's giving the toast, and then he like gives some dumb toast, and then like maybe we all end up in heaven before the devils are dead, and that was supposed to be the end of the scene. and Pete was supposed to and Pete, I was still rolling, and Pete goes, "What does that mean?" And like fully in character, he's like, and he's just like, and so everything that he kind of does after that was just after, I just after the scene had ended in the script, and I kept that whole thing in there because I thought it was really sweet and made him seem a little bit insecure, and he was really anxious about keeping. He was like, "Oh, I didn't know that I wouldn't have done all that if I broke character." I said, "No, it's perfect because you seem like you're this tough guy, and then you kind of broke character in this way, and it just makes him more layered." But he definitely was like, fought me for a minute to cut that, and Pete was luckily like, "No, it's fantastic. You're crazy. You look great."
Yeah. I mean, it's one that we get laughs every single time, and
Yeah.
we know this movie is not always going to be like. There are laugh out loud moments, but when we get like one for sure, we just try to
Keep it.
try to elevate stuff around it.
We haven't really talked that extensively about Pete yet, and he was an executive producer on the film, right?
Yeah.
He's on screen, and he essentially, to me at least, he plays the character you expect Pete Davidson to play. I'm wondering how did the character change when he took on the role, and I guess how did that character change in editing as well?
I'll speak to how it changed from script to screen, and then maybe Waldo, you can speak to how it changed from, I guess, shooting and then our process in editing. But I can say that when Pete came on, the character changed immensely because like I said, I had this idea of this journey that Mo was going to be on, and I knew who Zeke was. But for me, growing up where I grew up, which I think you're all familiar with, Zeke was Ferris Bueller, right? Zeke was someone that was a little bit more of a Midwestern, suburban, maybe a little bit privileged, maybe a little too smart for his own good kid, and he was more of there's like a joke in there where John Cryer calls him Eddie Haskell, right?
Yeah.
Like he was, and we did a round table actually, and everyone was like, "Who's Eddie Haskell?" All these like people and I was like, I guess we have to write in a joke where Pete doesn't know who Eddie Haskell is either. But anyway, that's who it was in my head, right? It wasn't this kind of much darker, more. I mean, there was a darkness to Zeke always, but I can tell you that like when I wrote the script in 2013, the first kind of actors I met with were like Miles Teller, Dave Franco. It was that tone, right? And something wasn't kind of clicking. It felt much more like something maybe you'd seen before, and it kind of occurred to me that Zeke had to be a stand-up comedian. I had to play him because there's something you can't fake. There's like a coolness you can't fake, and the kind of danger to the lifestyle of a stand-up comedian. So I was really I was like scouring like who are young, funny stand-up comedians, because actors playing funny and playing cool, I think sometimes can feel a little bit cloying. So, and Pete does not have to fake a lot of, of that. So I'd seen him do like a Comedy Central roast, or like when he was really, when he was like 19, and that was immediately like, oh, that's who Zeke is. He's a guy that like seems really cool if you're 16, but once you get past, that age, you kind of see that maybe that doesn't last. And so I did everything I could to get him the script. I had friends who wrote for SNL and who produced the show, so I got him the script that way. And so he came on board in like 2015, but we had no money to make the movie. We did but he was like, "Yeah, I love the script," and we were like, "Call me if you can ever make it." And when American High, this company that ended up making the film, came on, luckily Pete was still available. And I can just tell you that the process was really interesting because Zeke for him was so different than Zeke for me. Like his Zekes were these Staten Island guys, and it was much more dangerous, and it was a lot more close just in terms of like, it wasn't Bruce Springsteen and Rolling Stones posters and Beatles posters on the walls, right? It was DMX and Wu-Tang Clan, and it was just something. And what I kind of realized was Zeke can look like Pete Zeke and still be my story, right? And still be that arc. and I didn't have to change anything except for maybe a tattoo scene in the movie to like, and what I realized was like, instead of trying to force Pete to be my Zeke, I just let him be his and just made sure we were telling the right story and the tone was the right, you know, and we weren't kind of like going outside of the lines. So a lot of that was just, and he was, and by bringing him into that process, oh, I want to wear these shoes, I want to wear these pants, I want to wear the, like, and letting him feel ownership over this character, I think, you know, and that was really a lot of what the executive producing he did was, which was like, this is like, he kind of helped me create the look of Zeke's world, right? And so yeah, and I think that it was too, and a lot of people say, oh, Pete's playing Pete, but I don't think he is, because I know, you know, I especially after knowing Pete, like he's playing his guys, he's playing the guys that inspired him and made him who he is in a lot of ways. But it's Pete if he had lost his way, I guess, or if he had never become successful. So, and then I'll let, you know, and then Waldo, you can talk to just the, you know, but I'll just say that the great thing about Pete's performance is that he just gives you so many, he kind of has like this Adam Driver energy where it's the least expected line read always. And with someone like John Cryer, who's going to always give you like a perfect, like he like knows exactly how he wants to play the role and just gives it to you every time. Pete gives you something. He's kind of just like, he's so, you know, I guess like spontaneous with his acting, where it's just like whatever hits him in that moment. And so we had a lot of material and a lot of different levels of Pete to play with. Yeah, Waldo, you want to take it from there?
Yeah, I mean, I think this is just another point of talking about collaboration, really. Like, Jason can talk about how he had Pete's in his life, or Zeke's in his life, and Pete has Zeke's in his life as well, and Griffin and all these other people. But as an editor, I did too. And one of the best things is that I look at the script and I go, oh, I know these people, I know these experiences as well. And so what the great thing was is that I was actually there on set while they were shooting. So I could take those ideas that I had about Pete early on and bring it to Jason. And essentially every single day what I would do is I would cut all day and then find a way to get the set for like half an hour or something, just to say hi and check in and, you know, make sure that Jason gets kind of his 2 cents of what's going on and where we're at and if there's anything extra. And I told him really early on that I don't want to cut Pete. Like, I think the people that keep on saying that Pete is playing himself are the people who are not reading between the lines. Mm-hmm. Because yeah, he's always going to play himself. That's why you hire the person. Like, you want them to play. That's why you cast it the right way. But if you're telling me that's the same guy that does the okay like stuff and like, no, it's not. We looked at what performances he gave in SNL and we go, okay, well, this is what he does in SNL. This is where what we want him to be. And so we use those punctuations to bounce back and forth. And I learned this I have a lot of mentors. You know, I worked in comedy for a long time and I had a lot of mentors and that cut Curb Your Enthusiasm and a bunch of shows like that. And so to work with someone like Pete and also with Jason, because once again, if I didn't have someone like Jason that doesn't mind harsh cuts and doesn't mind those things, we wouldn't get a Coulson line read that we really wanted in there. Or we wouldn't get Pete saying you're mean in the way that we want to say you're mean. Like, and he like pushes me to like let it breathe more. And I'm always told to like tighten it up. And when you look at the overall movie, I think it's all really evenly paced. But that's the difference between getting like from script to shooting to editing is that, yeah, the line reads the lines change sometimes, but for the most part it didn't. Pete always, even if he was improv, he always got us to the place where we want to go, but he got us in the most interesting way. Like, the great example is, Jason, you can talk about this scene too, where Holly, Griffin, and Pete are all sitting there after Holly cooks them a meal. So Sydney Sweeney, Griffin, and Pete. And Pete just starts talking about frappuccinos and all these other things, and I cut it in a completely different way, more like a tighter version of it. And Jason comes in and goes, "No, this is the kind of idea where I wanted to go and do this stuff with Pete. Like, let him be rambling a little bit here." And, okay, great. And so then we looked at the type of comedy that he wanted to show. I think that's a great example of like, what I like to tell young editors is try to cut all the short scenes first so you can try to find your characters. And so even though I was getting dailies as we went, I would always try to cut the shorter scenes first so I can actually feel out who Zeke is and who Mo is and who Stacy is and all those characters. And shorter scenes that then we can bring it to the longer scenes and go, okay, let's balance this off so we can actually heighten them up or heighten her up with different elements of other parts of their character.
All right, looking at some other questions. Let's see. Richard asks, did the script have the same working title as the final film? Is it hard coming up with titles for films focusing on adolescence?
Script was always Big Time Adolescence. It was something that I probably doubted myself with the title for a long time, because it's like because adolescence is a really hard thing to spell, and it's not a very many people had issues, and many people just had issues. I think that it's not it's, for me, it was always going to be a title that was not like that was more thematic than, I guess, plot, and it was always going to be like titles I always loved are like Mean Streets and like Dazed and Confused, so it was always going to be thematic in that way. And Big Time Adolescence was something I had read in a short story about a woman talking about being like famous briefly in high school in the 60s, and she was like a Motown singer, and someone asked her what it was like, and she said, "Oh, it was just Big Time Adolescence," and so I always stuck with me, and that's why I called it that.
I really like this question from Chris. I had one that was similar. It says, of all the songs in the world, how did you land on Sister Hazel that Pete sings in the karaoke scene?
I mean, that was a case of like being on set playing a million songs, yeah, and like which one, we knew the tone. We knew it was going to be something that was not of Zeke's world, right? It was going to be something a little bit nostalgic and a little bit kind of funny and something you might find on a karaoke machine. But it was a lot of that was like, again, indie filmmaking. Like, we have to clear, when you have someone singing in the movie, you have to clear that before you shoot it, right? You can't like just dub that later like it's playing on the radio. So we had great music supervisors we sent them like a list of 15 songs, and they sent us back, this is how much it's going to cost you. And I think we ended up with that one. We were all very excited about that one. And yeah, I think in the original script, he's singing something by like the band, like The Night They Drove Old Dixie Down or something. But that's what we ended up with. And Pete did a great job singing it.
Was he familiar with the song?
Yeah, he was very familiar. It was like me and him playing music like during like lunch on set. Like, what about this one? What about that one? What about this one? And that was definitely the genre that we landed in.
Yeah, I mean, I would like that. So like, just overall the music and the movie. First, I really loved the soundtrack. It was a lot of fun to work with something that was this interesting and kind of all over the place a little bit. But that's really a lot of what Jason brought into this, where he sent me a playlist, and before or even while I was reading the script, I think I was listening to the playlist the whole time. And it had all these different types of music up and down, from country to rap to R&B to rock and all that stuff. And I think we got really lucky with just trying all these different elements in there. And I'm assuming Sister Hazel was a part of that, where you just kept on trying and you just found something that worked.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I was also curious on how you landed on where the boys are.
So Where the Boys Are is interesting. So with that, that was a song that was always like in my kind of like, I had this like, for me, this is a love story between like these two boys. And so there were all these kind of like classic love songs. Like I had all these like Leslie Gore songs in my like that I was listening to that were like kind of like melodramatic teen, you know, like love songs. Like, I just thought it was really, you know, I liked the way it was juxtaposed against kind of the music of Zeke's world. But originally the score, like my score kind of temp like that I had been sending in was a lot of like Joy Division and like and there was a lot of like music of like that tone, and it was originally going to be the song Atmosphere, a Joy Division, in that moment, and we put it in, and it was way too dramatic. Mm-hmm. It was like melodramatic. It was like that moment, that pool moment. It felt like, and I brought only one person saw the movie with that song, and I brought my friend Austin into the editing room, and he was like, these, because this was the song that I would listen to and I'd write the scene and the drums, and there was like really in this like great, you know, like this, I thought it was like this epic moment. And
my editor's cut was way more, that like influenced my editor's cut too, where it was way more darker.
It was much darker. The music was much darker. Yeah.
The beginning of the movie was just like way darker. Like
yeah. I think I don't know what I think that I would just like, I think we really changed that when I watched the film, and I kind of wanted to just, and Where the Boys Are was this moment where I was like, okay, we need to change the song for this moment. It's too dramatic, it's too intense, but I wanted something that was like still had power, right, and still kind of like had that epicness, but maybe was like less taking itself seriously. And Where the Boys Are kind of did that, where it's like, because it was a song that was like I had in my playlist for this movie that was like, this is one of these movie songs that like is my kind of funny idea of what this movie is. And so we put it in, and it worked, and it was just great.
Chris asks, another question from Chris. There's a long history of underwater shots in movies. What efforts did you take to make yours distinct?
Yeah, so I a lot of this, like, look, there's a lot of, this movie is a coming of age movie, and there's a lot of coming of age, you know, tropes, and there's a lot of things that, you know, and for me, and there's a lot of things in here that were nods to films I love, and like museum, like like Ferris Bueller and with the museum scene and things like that, and the swimming pool scene is no different. For me, the roof jump and the pool jump, it was a lot of how, again, when you're making a film like this, an independent film, a lot of it is like, how do we make it different, but also like, how do we just make it right? Like, how do we just make it so in like the time we have, with the budget we have, to make it work and make it look good, when they're not going to actually let Griffin jump off the roof into the pool. So we've got to shoot it from Zeke's point of view, deep in the backyard, and use a stunt double, and the pool was too far from the house that we wanted to shoot in, so he doesn't actually jump. So then you cut to the pool, and for me, that was, I think there's like 3 moments in the film where I feel like are like heightened moments, right? Where it's like I wanted everything to feel super authentic and super realistic, and then I allowed myself 2 or 3, like the opening credits, and then this moment, and I'm trying to think, you know, what there was maybe one more where it was like either a slow motion moment or something like that. The shower when he's stoned, and the beads of water on hitting his face. And this was one of those moments where I kind of gave myself creative license to use jump cuts in the pool and those kinds of things. But it was about, you know, how do we shoot this in a way that we wanted to have these bags, the money and the like little bags of weed and drugs floating around him. And that was something we had to have them like on little they were weighted to the bottom of the pool. So they were on strings that were on like little rocks from the bottom, so they would like float in the shot. But yeah, I think that for the most part, it was, how do we just achieve it?
Yeah, and it was raining.
And it was pouring rain, and Griffin was freezing, and I felt terrible.
Yeah. I mean, that was an interesting day for sure.
Yeah, absolutely.
All right, another question from Richard. He asks, what are some of the other tensions with the usual teen movie genre and what you wanted to do?
Some of the other tensions with the usual teen drama.
Genre, yeah.
I guess, I mean, for me, I can just say that for me, it was about telling a story that instead of trying to tell a teen story that was like, this is what teens are going through today in 2020, I tried to just focus on the things that were timeless about being a teenager. And I tried to focus on the themes that were universal. And so in a lot of ways, that's what all the best teen movies have, which is kind of why they stay timeless and why they're, and maybe why all those movies follow a similar structure, or have similar tropes. But yeah, for me, it was about telling a story with contemporary characters in as timeless a way as possible. And that was kind of what I focused on always.
As we, again, I guess this is my own question. I felt like when I saw this movie at Sundance 2019, Pete was in, it was like right when he was starting to really hit the I guess the tabloids in a lot of negative and shocking ways. As you were filming it, as this film was being edited and cut, and I guess as you were giving these test screenings, were you seeing that perspective from the audience affecting their reaction to your film?
Never in the creative process. Never in the process of like, I was never making this film with that in mind. It was always in mind of like, how is this going to affect, the general public's, like, how is it, like, what version of Pete, is when we released this movie, because I think that he was someone whose life was changing so rapidly that it was like, it was constantly like, what is his life going to be if this movie comes out in 3 months, in 6 months, in a year? But the good thing was that we were in constant communication. I think that he was also really good about keeping that stuff separate. But I do, I was cognizant of how his perception online and on Pete in the tabloids. And I think again, that goes back to just me being, it made me just excited to show this movie to people, because I just knew that I was going to be able to show Pete in a completely different light than they had been talking about. And I think that was really exciting for Pete too. Like, Pete was really anxious for this to come out because he knew that everyone had been talking about him in his personal life for so long. All he wanted was to be able to like say, like, look, I'm not like a Kardashian. I'm not famous for no reason. Like, I'm an actor. I'm an artist, and I do this kind of thing.
Yeah, I was watching the dailies, and I just knew we had something really good. So, I mean, I know Jason didn't yet, but that's once I got through the editor's cut, I was sitting there and going, yeah, I mean, I wasn't worried about what people thought of Pete in and out of this. I mean, I don't know him really. Jason does, but but what I do know of him, I think people have a lot of misconceptions of what type of person he is and who, like, all this other stuff. I mean, I think he is really sweet to the people he wants to be sweet to. And look, for example, he's never mean to Mo. Like, in the actual show, there's so much that we cut out that he could have been mean to other characters and even Mo. And I just kept on looking at Jason. Like, no, this is not authentic. He's not ever going to be mean to Mo. He's going to be to people that are at his level, at his height, maybe. But still, most of the time, no. They're all pretty good people. They just make a lot of mistakes.
I think I got one more question, and this one's directed specifically at you, Waldo. Oh, Richard wants to know: Did you make your bed for this event, or are you really that neat?
I am really that neat.
He's really that neat.
Yeah, I'm just that. You guys are actually. I'm watching you on my editing system at home, but I'm just in a small apartment, so.
Well, thank you so much for joining us on this call. A lot of compliments to you all as well. Like one from Michelle. Thank you for your time. I enjoyed the movie. And of course, you can see in the chat, everyone has been thanking you for being here. So I want to thank you myself as well.
Yeah, I want to say thanks. As a U of M grad, this has been a treat for sure. I'm glad that everyone got to watch it, and I'm, Jason doesn't know this, but I definitely wore a Michigan hat to my interview with him because I knew we would connect a little bit through that.
It worked.
Yeah, but it's Michigan means a lot to me, and I'm glad that we all can connect through that. So
Great. Thanks, guys.
Yeah, thank you all for joining us. So
We look forward to having you both at the theater and Cinetopia soon.
We look
Yeah.
forward to
In
it.
person. Yeah.
We'd love that.
yeah, I love that.
All right.
all right,
Okay,
great.
good night,
All
everyone.
right, goodbye, everybody. Have a safe evening and stay safe.
You
All
too.
right,
Bye-bye.
See you guys. Thank you.